Hello, welcome to the MMG podcast. For those of you that do not know who we are and what we do, we deliver virtual and hybrid event production. We either do that on site, working with other AV companies, or we do that fully remotely. We work on full-scale global events, and likewise we work on small productions that are just a couple of cameras and a single stream. For today, I wanted to introduce you to our guest who's with us, which is Phill from Birddog. Phill, tell us a little bit about what you do first.
Yeah, in general terms, I look after sales for the EMEA region. And as Birddog is relatively a small company, that can be anything from looking after distributors, resellers, and customers, doing demonstrations, packing cameras up to send them out, organizing trade shows. So really anything and everything that you could think of that's associated with sales within the region, I oversee and look after with the help of my colleagues and our distributors.
One of the things I wanted to touch on with this was also not just about Birddog, but also about yourself and like where you come from, what you do, because I think there's a lot of history in kind of the lead up to Birddog. It didn't just sort of come out of nowhere, did it? It did take a little bit of a slow burn. And I think it was a culmination of people coming together. And I was curious if, what your history was, how you ended up being Birddog.
My history with broadcast, broadcast market goes back for over 25 years now. I first started working for a small reseller, which doesn't exist anymore. It's sort of disappeared over the years. But I started with NLE systems. So the first sort of computer-based editing systems from Fast. I'm not sure if anybody out there will remember Fast, but they used to have some products called Purple, Silver, Blue, Chrome that were DV Cam and MPEG-2 based sort of editing systems. So I worked as a reseller selling that, and then moving through into all of the broadcast cameras and lenses and accessories that you'd expect from people like Sony, Canon, Panasonic, Fuji, Sackler, Vinton, all of the usual traditional sort of broadcast camera ENG type products. So I did that for probably about 16 years. Then decided to move across, and I worked for a distributor in the UK called Digibox, who are still around now. And they were the distributor at that point for Birddog within Europe. So I started working fairly early on with Dan and Eamon. And that was actually before really the first product was actually ever actually released and announced from Birddog. So my sort of history with Birddog started from that point of view. So I did that for a couple of years. Birddog at that point had grown to a size where they wanted to start taking on people to work their own salespeople. And I had the opportunity to jump across and join them full time, which I did. And that was coming up for 5 years ago now. So my history with Birddog sort of goes back about 7 years in total, which has been interesting to see the company grow from having one product to over 30 products, from being a private company to sort of floating on the stock exchange in Australia. It's been an interesting journey.
Cool. I mean, from an outside perspective, initially, sort of just looking in at what was going on, it did seem really cool, which is one of the reasons why we gravitated to the product. That was part of it, in fairness. You know what I mean? Like, it just, cool logo, cool attitude. And it was just like, yeah, okay, we'll give this a go, especially because we kind of needed a solution. And we were leaning over to NDI to kind of provide that for us, And then all of the products that we were using were just like, yeah, this works really great. And our guys like swear by, particularly the P200 still, for the corporate gigs. When you've got other news and other products, I'm sure that will sort of change in some light. But for the moment, they're like the staple part of our diet,
Yeah, I mean, the P200 was the first camera that we actually released and announced, and it's been our biggest selling product over the last 5 years. It came about really at the time of COVID, when people were looking for remote workflows and, how to simplify things and keep people working. So it really came around at the right time. But P200 is a good camera. Still a good camera today in comparison to other things that are around. It is 5 years old though, so it is I'm going to say a dinosaur in terms of cameras and camera technology. Sensor in it is a little bit older, and obviously with the new X series that we sort of started to release with the X1 and the X1 Ultra, and with more cameras to come as we move through the next 6 to 12 months. They'll be updated with newer sensors, newer technology. So we're really building on the foundations that we laid with the original P200 cameras.
When you joined the company, because you said it was about 5 years ago, right? So does that mean that for you, the COVID experience was working for Birddog at that point?
It was, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my experience, with Birddog, I spent obviously that 12 months and 12 and a bit months actually working from home. And I'm going to say it's the busiest I've ever been, but it's probably very close to the busiest I've ever been. We had products, we had availability, we had stock in the warehouse. And then there was that requirement for people wanting products like we had, like the NDI technology, cloud technology, to be able to carry on doing work and to make things remote, accessible, and to reduce the number of people that were required, obviously with the limitations of the number of people you could have in rooms and working together. It all sort of came about at the same time. So while I had a lot of friends that were furloughed, I carried on working throughout the pandemic, which was actually good because I didn't go stir crazy like they did.
Exactly, yeah. It's a bit of a sanity holder, isn't it? I mean, I spent my COVID mainly working out what the limitations of vMix were, to be quite honest. A product that initially I thought wouldn't catch on. This is when I went sort of years back before then, and then realised that it was like the main sort of hub for what we do now. So with NDI, because obviously that's a big thing with you guys, and that's one of the things that we love. Like you put the chip in originally. At that point, was that like a conscious decision? This is the way everything's going, or was it kind of like we should make it available?
So yeah, I mean, putting in NDI onto a chip was really at that point the only way to go. I mean, in the infancy of NDI, you had two versions. You had HX and full NDI, and the only way to do full NDI correctly, to be able to get the speeds and everything that you needed, was to go via the FPGA route. So it's one of the first things we did as a company was design and implement NDI onto a silicon chip. Which then became the sort of mainstay of our products. You can find that sort of FPGA design in all of our products that we produced over the last 5 years.
See, that was the thing that we had, is we needed something solid to do that.
Yeah,
and that's what it gave us.
FPGAs provide that, and obviously that the beauty of them is that they can be programmed and you can update them in the field. So we could continue to look at firmware updates and moving forward with the products as new versions of NDI became available, as we thought of new features potentially that we could add in. So it's meant that we've constantly been able to update products, obviously to a limit. At some point chips do get old, and the size of the chips with the newer versions of NDI mean that some products, unfortunately, we can't update any further than we have now. But we plan to keep going with the products and updating them for as long as we can.
Have you got like a future vision of everything just being NDI, or do you sort of sit in a kind of world where it might be a bit of both? Or
it's an interesting question. I think as a company we were focused on NDI solely, but I think really we're a technology company, so we design all of our own products. We have our own variation of the NDI SDK that we use. So we've actually rewritten it slightly to increase the speed, so to reduce the latency. So we have the engineering staff and we have the knowledge to do different things. So if there's another format that comes along that is interesting, then there's no reason why we wouldn't look at that in addition to the NDI products that we make.
Cool. I think realistically, the NDI could actually take over all of the other signal flows, but this is sort of like where, from a production industry sort of point, I would meet some resistance, because there's a lot of people that are like, no, must solely be SDI cable. We need the copper. It needs to be there. But for all of the workflows we have, like I haven't found a fault. Like, yes, if it's set up badly, then there's loads. But if it's set up correctly, it's actually really robust and a highly efficient way to hook up, countless venues across the world.
Yeah, a lot of NDI relies on the network and the network infrastructure. As you say, if that's not set up correctly, then it's going to fall over, unfortunately. So network and switch units really become the backbone of any large-scale NDI deployment. And we have a number of deployments where we're talking, 500-600 NDI feeds in a facility. So it can be done. It's just got to be done correctly with some IT guys who know how to set up VLANs and set up the NDI topography really on the network.
Excellent. Phil, I was going to ask you as well about, obviously you've done loads of trade shows and stuff, haven't you? Have you seen any other products or things that you thought caught your eye at all?
Do you know what? Trade shows as a manufacturer become really difficult because you don't get the opportunity to actually look around. So having worked as a reseller and a distributor, you're walking the trade floors for 3-4 days, however long the show is, looking at other manufacturers' products. But as a manufacturer, your whole world is that sort of 45 square meter space that you've got at the trade show, and even bit to get some lunch at times becomes difficult. So really get an opportunity to look around, actually see new equipment. There are always people that I keep my eye on in terms of technology and what they're doing. Products from manufacturers that I've sold in the past as a reseller that always interest me. Still interested in cameras, so I keep my eye on Sony and Panasonic with the release of the Burano and the and various different products from them, and AJA as well. I love the updates to the Key Pro Go that they've just released. So yeah, there's nothing really massively that sticks out at the moment. But from a general technology point of view, I do try and keep my eyes and ears open to see what's coming out.
One thing we were curious actually was to do with AI, because obviously there's AI tracking. That's something that's sort of coming more and more. Have you got any other sort of views or visions on how AI might impact productions in the future? Would they potentially be able to make the whole production? If you said, okay, AI, can you please produce a medical show for me? It's a short operation and we'd like you to cut several times and make it feel natural. Do you think you would ever pull that off? Or
I'm not sure AI would take over complete productions and running a complete production. There's certainly areas where AI can assist and help. But that would probably be at the loss of some jobs, unfortunately. As things become more intelligent and workflows become more streamlined, then the requirement to have as many people does go down, unfortunately. But I don't ever see AI completely doing a production. I just don't think it's probably clever enough to do that, particularly when you're talking about talking heads and sports and that sort of stuff. There's some very interesting things that you can do with AI, though, in terms of technology. There's some projects that we've talked to customers about, and some things that we've already implemented using some very interesting AI technology from a company in Germany that we work with called Deep Eyes. And that's really around the pharmaceutical industry. And they've got some very interesting technology available to them that we've introduced and worked with them on. And obviously AI tracking within cameras, it's great. It helps, and it can be useful, depending on what you're doing with it.
That's cool. I mean, from my point of view, like, it's a little bit of a leading question because actually, yeah, I agree with you. Like, AI is great, and there's loads of uses for it, but in reality, it does need to be backed up by technical crew and people that know what they're doing to make the changes and to manage it. I think one of the things in the industry that was a big deal at one point was like Sound Desks produced Dan Dugan, which you're familiar with, I'm not sure, but basically like gain sharing really. And I think a lot of sound techs thought that actually their job was near enough over and that everyone would just plug their mics into Dan Dugan and that would solve everything. But in reality, it's just become another tool that they use, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd see AI in production in a similar way as well. Yeah.
One of the things, right, that we've asked everyone is basically if you're going into the AV industry in whatever context, whether it's working with the cameras, building the cameras, anything like that, because at the moment there seems to be like quite a skills shortage all round. And like, what would your advice be for someone looking to get into AV, be it to work behind a camera, to build a camera, to research a camera, you know, or well, I suppose not even just cameras, make it a bit broader. But like, what would you say to people starting out in the industry about how to get their foot in and what to do?
It's an interesting question. Obviously, a lot of technology these days is going IP based. So having a good basic knowledge of networking, and understanding around networks to be able to help with that side of it, obviously, would be great. But then, cameras have lenses, they have apertures, they focus. So, generally, understanding cameras, camera technology, doing the basic training around how to use a camera and how to set cameras up. You still see a lot of people who, even with basic PTZ cameras, have issues with lighting, cameras being overexposed, underexposed, noisy, and particularly in mixed lighting environments where you've got some very strange colors on stages being thrown together. Even the best cameras in the world would struggle with some of the sets I've seen. So just an overall understanding of camera technology, lenses, and IP. And workflows, and that's probably one of the critical things these days, particularly in an AV environment, is actually the workflow and actually being able to build a workflow using a number of different products from different manufacturers to create overall vision. So it's just a general understanding of basically everything that everybody sells. So yeah, not a huge amount to do really in terms of learning.
I think one of the things that we've had as like a common theme in that answer is not necessarily, and I'm not saying like don't go to school, guys, because like, that's not the way forward, is it? I suppose, but a lot of people sort of say that actually it's not about what qualification you've got along the way, and that it all really sort of hangs on experience, knocking on a door to start your journey, that kind of thing. I don't know if you agree or not, but this might be one of the industries that still has that open.
You're probably right. It is. There's a lot of companies out there who base their job applications on graduate credentials and experience, not necessarily experience, but what they've learned at school, college, university. Which is great, but sometimes that doesn't apply into the real world once we actually start working. And I think you're right. The only way really to gain experience within this industry is to start at the bottom and work up. You gain the knowledge as you're working, as you're building projects and putting equipment together, as you're walking around trade shows, as you're networking. So it probably is one of the only industries left really where you could actually work that way and actually grow by working hard and getting to know everything.
Okay, so this is like the conversation around like ADHD, ASD, that kind of thing, right? And I find the majority of technicians that we work with are on the spectrum, right? And this tends to mean that they are able to hyper focus, which is basically like, when you have a thing that you love and you literally know everything about it, and you're like, oh my god, this. But yeah, it tends to be like a bit of a superpower when it comes to AV and especially engineering, because like it kind of unlocks the door to having that mentality to pull it apart and fix it and change it and investigate it.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I could certainly see how that would work. And how that would, yeah, completely understand that. Yeah.
Okay, look, let's jump into NDI, something that you guys have been at the forefront of for some time now.
Yeah, I think so. As Birddog, we've always been known for having full NDI products, and when NDI was first announced, there were only two flavors. So you had HX at the bottom, which was 14 meg, high latency, low picture quality, and full NDI. There wasn't anything in between. So naturally, we went for the full NDI option, which gave you the iframe, 120 meg, low latency, which is what broadcasters wanted. Let's face it, most people want the best quality they can get with their video and audio. However, over the last 6 years, NDI has progressed, has got better with each iteration. And like anything, codecs become faster, they become more efficient. Everything gets that little bit smarter as time goes by. So now we find ourselves with our new cameras. We've got the X1 and the X1 Ultra, and we've been asked a number of times, why aren't they full NDI? Why are they only NDI HX3? So NDI HX progressed to NDI HX2, so that increased the picture quality, decreased the latency, but it still wasn't, hitting that sweet spot in terms of the overall package they provided. HX3 really is the codec that does that. So it reduces your bit rate down to around 80 megabits per second. Latency, VisRT NDI have a benchmark of 100 milliseconds using their test parameters. So to be certified as an HX3 product, it has to be less than 100 milliseconds. So around about 2 frames. So obviously that still sounds pretty high. However, in testing with our new cameras, we're actually finding that we're actually able to reduce that even more. And we recently did a test against the X1 against our P240 camera, and we were able to get lower latency from the new X1 camera than we were compared to our P240. So I think the argument really around latency is starting to disappear. The image quality of HX3 is pretty good, and unless you're probably a tier 1 broadcaster or hyper focused on a critical picture, it would be suitable for some most environments, house of worship, schools, college education, corporate. So it gives you the best of both worlds. So that's one of the reasons why we've looked at HX3 initially in our lower end products. We haven't completely ignored full NDI. That will come later as we build out the range of cameras. But it's probably one thing, just to sort of mention and to reassure people that we're not just ignoring full NDI, and there are reasons why we have gone down the HX3 route to start with. And we are looking at and delivering some other information around this over the next few months as well.
Cool. So we'll keep our eyes open.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now's the time definitely to keep the eyes open. We've been very quiet for the last 12 months. We've reorganized our engineering team completely, the way that we work. We've obviously been in the process of designing an entire new camera range as well. So we've got a few things to announce that will come up over the next 6-12 months.
Where can people see this stuff? So if they want to keep an eye, where's best?
Obviously, keep an eye on our website and our social media feeds. Any new announcements will go to those places first, and then obviously the next big show coming up, really from a broadcast point of view, is IBC in September. So we'll be there in Hall 7, and we'll have all of the new stuff that we announce on the stands, and be very happy to see as many people as we can, and talk to them about new equipment, NDI, workflows, and that includes workflows outside of just Birddog products. We'll have third-party partners, equipment on our stand as well, that we work with, people like LiveView, DeGiro, Densitron, and maybe a few others.
Cool. I mean, actually, we've got some guys from LiveView popping in for like a little podcast session a couple of weeks' time. And I was talking to them, and obviously we mentioned Birddog and things. So yeah, the way everything ties together between brands is really good. It's nice to see like a little ecosystem in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Birddog, we have a bit of an ecosystem anyway. We have cameras, we have converters, and we have software to tie it all together. So from that point of view, as a company, we are fairly unique. Really, the only other sort of people that have that are Etech or Vizati, as they are now. But we also appreciate that we don't provide everything within a workflow. So we do work closely with and talk with other manufacturers who produce NDI products to make sure that we integrate and work with their products as well.
A couple of quick fire questions, mate. That's all. Yeah. So the first one is, what got you into the industry?
By chance. It was purely by chance. I did A-level photography. I left school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I worked in offices, and then by chance, I ended up working for a company called TopTex, who was still a reseller in the UK. And that got me into the broadcast industry. And with my sort of stills photography background, it was fairly easy to pick up and understand video cameras, and then into non-linear editing.
What has changed the most in the industry since you started?
There's been a lot of changes, but the biggest changes are the IP infrastructure and workflows that we're now seeing coming through. When I started, it was tape-based, non-linear editing, and now we're able to send signals anywhere around the building using a single Cat5 cable, which, going back to 25 years ago, that would have been a triax cable with a limited run. So yeah, it's really the movement to IP-based technology.
What's your most memorable event? But it seems quite wide. I mean, that could be in your whole life if you like.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about my life, then my marriage, birth of my children. From a sort of work point of view, probably the move to Birddog was probably the biggest one. I think reseller to distributor, distributor to manufacturer was sort of the route I always looked and thought about taking, but actually coming a full-time employee with a company that really were delivering at that point, cutting edge technology in terms of NDI and IP-based workflows, really was probably one of the biggest high points.
Phil, it's been great speaking with you today. I'm really excited to see where we're going to take things in the future.
Hey, no problem at all. It was great to chat with you as well.